There you go.
Good morning, Senators, and welcome. And I'd like to welcome those who may be watching us across the country today on Parle View. Colleagues, we're meeting under our general order of reference to discuss consular and emergency assistance in the context of the situation in the Middle East. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming from Global Affairs Canada, Sébastien Beaulieu, Director General, International Emergency and Travel Advice Bureau, and Yannick Lamond, Director, Emergency Operations Division. I want to, on behalf of the committee, thank you very much for being here today. We know the work that you're doing is very valuable for Canadians who are in harm's way in the Middle East, and that you and your teams are working 24/7 on this situation. Before we hear your opening statement and proceed to questions and answers, I would ask everyone present, please, to mute the notifications on your devices. This is an unnecessary distraction. I'd also ask you to check the best practices card in terms of using earpiece and microphone, just to protect our talented interpreters and technical staff. And we're now ready to hear opening remarks. Colleagues, this meeting will go for an hour and a half, so we have a fair amount of latitude in terms of questions and answers, but I will, as usual, be relatively strict. Mr. Beaulieu, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président, et merci aux membres.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, committee members.
Date on Canada's consular and emergency response to the situation in the Middle East and in the Gulf region. I know this is an important issue for you as senators and as parliamentarians, and it's an important issue to so many Canadians as well. Last week, my colleague Yannick Lamond, Director of Operations, offered parliamentarians a technical briefing and provided background on our operations, and today I'm here to provide an update on those operations. The security environment remains volatile and fast-moving, and I want to begin by reaffirming that the safety of Canadians in the region and of our own personnel remains our highest priority. We have demonstrated this repeatedly over the past weeks through our efforts in the Middle East, as well as in our responses to the recent crises in Mexico and Cuba. Global Affairs Canada entered this crisis with significant preparedness and experience in the region. Our missions operate in a complex and volatile environment across the Middle East, maintaining high readiness to scale our preparedness as required. From the outset of this crisis, we initiated our well-established processes to coordinate across our network abroad with our whole-of-government partners and with partner countries throughout the region and the world. This includes surging additional capacity into our Emergency Watch and Response Center, which this committee has visited a few years ago. And at the peak of our operations, in terms of numbers of calls being received, we had over 3 shifts of 50 people per day answering calls of Canadians from the region. In terms of government coordination, we are having daily calls with representatives from each of our missions in the region, all government departments concerned, and representatives from across Global Affairs Canada. That enables us to share information quickly and inform decision-making to respond to the changing realities on the ground. In terms of deployments abroad and surge capacity to reinforce our network, we deployed 30 members from the Standing Rapid Deployment Team, SRDT, across Turkey, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Armenia, Jordan, Israel, Egypt, and the Gulf, to surge that consular support and assist Canadians. The Standing Rapid Deployment Team is a group of highly trained employees ready to deploy on short notice to provide emergency response coordination and consular assistance. Our staff's presence at border crossings and transit points out of Iran and the region has enabled safe crossings out of Iran through Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkmenistan. The SRDTs are also reinforcing missions in the region to meet clients at border crossings and airports as they make their way out of the region. We have emphasized over the past 2 weeks clear, consistent public communications throughout our response. And I'm pleased to report that as of today, there are no consular cases of Canadians injured or any casualties in the region, and we hope that remains so. Our travel advice and advisories, referred to as TAA, and registration of Canadians abroad, you may have heard the acronym ROCA, messaging have been frequent and timely. We are able, through the system, to reach out to over 100,000 Canadians who are registered to receive updated information and messaging. Since February 27th, we've issued nearly 100 updates to our travel advice across the region and pushed over 100 messages either across the region to the 100,000 registrants or more tailored messaging to specific destinations for information on that territory, or with very practical and operational information on departure options, and in the case of travel that we were facilitating, specific muster points. These communications have been amplified through direct emails and social media to provide Canadians with timely information on airspace, border openings, and available departure options. Our preparedness also includes our long-standing network of international partnerships, and we are in daily contact with our Five Eye partners, the European Union, and governments across the region. Importantly, last week we concluded a memorandum of cooperation with Japan on mutual assistance in emergency responses. That was very timely and had been in the works prior to the situation evolving, but we've seen it play out very favorably over the past 2 weeks with that concrete cooperation on the ground that we like to see. Je voudrais maintenant vous donner une image claire de la manière dont nous avons aidé
I'd like to give you a clear picture of how we've been helping Canadians who are permanent residents and their families to leave the region. When airspace was closed or inadequate, we used the broad range of consular tools at our disposal, including group reservations on commercial flights, block bookings, that is, one charter flight. We organized buses and ground movements. We provided direct border support, and in some cases facilitated the visa issue for Canadians attempting to leave Iran and a transit through neighboring countries. We secured seats on Middle East Airlines flight from Beirut to Istanbul. We block booked seats on a charter out of the UAE to Istanbul. We also organized substantial ground transportation from Qatar to Kuwait, Bahrain, Israel, and Palestine. We facilitated bus movements to a safe third location where commercial options were available. Those efforts included supporting partners' nationals, and that enabled us to work with partners like Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, and others. We also received support from partners including Singapore and Japan. Travelers were also provided with support as they crossed from Israel into Egypt. We had staff deployed at Taba and welcomed them on the Egyptian side. In terms of what we've seen and the support we've been able to provide to Canadians, over the past 2 weeks, we have responded to over 11,000 inquiries since the crisis began. Daily inquiries are now decreasing. They were peaking at over 1,400 a day, and now we're down to about 400. To date, we have directly assisted nearly 1,000 Canadians in leaving the region with consular services, and CBSA data show nearly 8,000 Canadians have returned to Canada on their own. So in the past 2 weeks, over 8,000 Canadians have returned home, and we are very happy to see it because our call for caution has been heard. Canadians who are able to come back on their own are doing so in great numbers. At the same time, we're well aware the crisis is not over. Global Affairs Canada continues to support Canadians 24/7 across the region. We will continue adjusting our response based on operational realities, security conditions, and the needs of Canadians. Throughout, our message to Canadians has remained the same. Monitor our travel advice and advisories, register in ROCA, and contact our 24/7 emergency watch and response centre if necessary. We remain fully committed to supporting Canadians abroad as things evolve, and we'll be happy to keep you apprised of developments. Thank you, and we are now happy to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu.
Senator Hébert of Quebec has joined us. And colleagues, I want to remind you that we are looking at 3-minute rounds, so you will each have 3 minutes for question and answer. So please keep your preamble short and your questions precise, and I think we will have enough time for certainly a second round, if perhaps even a third. We will see. So starting, Senator Alzaibak, to be followed by Senator Ravaglia. Senator.
Mr. Chair, good morning, and thank you both for being with us today at such on such an important topic. My first question is to Mr. Beaulieu. Much of the evacuation effort so far appears to rely on commercial flights and charter arrangements. And if the situation deteriorates further and commercial air travel becomes unavailable, what contingent plans does Canada have to evacuate Canadians from the region?
Thank you. In most crises, the first order or advice we give Canadians is to shelter in place at the beginning of hostilities. And as the situation becomes clearer and safer, and as Canadians can move and depart, we first and foremost rely on commercial means when and where they are available. It's what's most convenient for Canadians, and it's what also makes sense from a stewardship of public funds. In this instance, in some cases, we've had to bus people to give them access to these commercial options, and in other instances, we've supplemented or made sure that on those commercial flights there were enough seats for the Canadians. So with our embassies, we reserved or block booked some seats, and then invited interested Canadians to make arrangements directly with the airlines and make their payments with the airlines. At the very beginning of the crisis, we did resort to a charter flight to ease those pressures. And as we've done in the past, those charters are part of our toolkit. In a situation where neither charters nor commercial options would be available, there are other means at our disposal through partnerships with other federal partners. I'm thinking in particular of the Canadian Armed Forces, but we are not there in the Middle East at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm fine.
Thank you. Senator Ravaglia, to be followed by Senator Busson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I was just wondering, at the present time, given the very sort of shifting reality of the crisis, what surge capacity does Global Affairs Canada maintain with respect to large-scale consular emergencies, and how are you deploying this currently? In addition to GAC, what other government departments are supporting Canada's emergency response? And perhaps you could further highlight the collaborative efforts that are taking place between Canada and our closest allies, because our allies in some instances have taken a rather different approach, including military flights out of these areas.
Great. I'm pleased to take the two parts of this question. First, on our surge capacity across our department. We have two main tools or two main pressure points from an emergency management response. The first one is responding to questions, calls, and inquiries from Canadians. And in our 24/7 center at Global Affairs, we have the capacity to surge physically with phone lines and desks, and we call on our regular staff across the department to come in and contribute shifts from their regular day job, either in lieu of or in addition to their regular day jobs, to come and answer the calls of Canadians. That effort, unfortunately, we have a lot of practice with that, so we have highly trained and skilled partners and surge responders across the department who, as soon as there's a crisis, know we're going to call them. Many of them volunteer without us even calling on them and come and work for us. The other element we have in terms of surging is the Standing Rapid Deployment Team. It's a team of skilled staff who are able to be deployed on short notice. We have some who are indeed on short notice to depart. As crises evolve, we have that roster and we activate that roster. And currently we have 30 Canadians in the region supplementing the efforts of our missions abroad. In terms of cooperation with other government departments, there's a range. I mentioned the DND and the Canadian Armed Forces. There's IRCC and CBSA. I was alluding to the numbers from CBSA in terms of returns. The role of IRCC is also key in terms of working to support permanent residents and their immediate family who may not be Canadian. So that's an important part as well in the process. In crises, many Canadians are without valid travel documents. So again, we work closely with IRCC to issue emergency travel documents or expedite the renewal and delivery of their passport so that they can make it home. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bussin to be followed by Senatrice Gerba.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for being here in these terrible times. It's very interesting to hear that your ability to respond to these kinds of urgencies and the numbers you give, the 11,000 people requesting help, and your ability to respond to that is certainly laudable. You know, the nightmare is urgency and complexity at the same time create special challenges. So in that regard, I just want to ask you that in February, the government announced that as part of their workforce adjustment, 483 positions are set to be eliminated at GAC. And I'm curious whether or not, given this new and pressing urgency of what's happening in the region, do you know whether or not there has been any signal that this decision might be revisited, given that, as you say, you're actually using volunteers in some cases to respond to these urgent matters?
These fiscal pressures are felt across the department as well as the Government of Canada more broadly. We are able and have put forward plans to continue to respond by updating and upgrading our processes, our ways of working, the use of technology. I was mentioning reaching out to 100,000 people many times over the past 2 weeks. We've improved and relied on technology. On our reporting, we've come up with new ways of integrating reports from across 12 missions into a single daily report that's then shared across the federal family. So through such efficiencies and improving our ways of working and frankly with the habit of doing this as well and developing our culture of crisis across the department, we will continue to be able to respond to Canadians despite the fiscal pressures.
Thank you. Thank you.
Follow up if you wish.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Of course. Senatrice Gerba to be followed by Senator Wilson.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et
Thank you, Chair. Once again, welcome to both our witnesses. According to Minister Anand, Canada's government could not do much to help Canadians leave Iran because we have no embassy there. So in the circumstances, what is the Canadian government doing to compensate for the lack of an embassy in Iran? Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to answer that question because it is important to point out how Canada, in spite of not having an embassy in Tehran, can communicate with Canadians in the country. We've been doing it for months and certainly communicated intensely in June of last year with our travel advisories, with our ROCA messages. When Canadians in Iran decide to leave, we are at the border crossings, transit points to welcome them. There are about 50 who've left over the past few weeks. It is a lower number than the number of Canadians who left in June during the preceding conflict, but we are there at border crossings to provide support and help them find a flight to Canada. You also indicated that 110,000 Canadians are registered with ROCA. Have any of those 110,000 indicated any interest in leaving? 8,000 have come back, but out of the 110,000 on ROCA, do you have any idea who would really like to come back or relocate elsewhere while waiting? The most important number regarding Canadians who want to leave the region is the number of daily calls or inquiries we receive. That is now down to 400. Most of those came from Canadians in countries whose airspace is open, like the UAE, Qatar. Our support is targeting commercial flights. If there are people who can't leave on a commercial flight for now, and it's certainly not 110,000 people, and we have over the past 2 weeks received about 10,000 inquiries. People register for all kinds of reasons, in fact, mainly to be kept abreast of what's going on, to read the advice, and that's why we push it to those 110,000 people who registered with ROCA. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, in terms of I'd be interested in hearing more to the extent that you can share about the agreement with Japan. And I'm also interested to know if we have other similar agreements with other countries, and in particular, if any of those countries have maintained a diplomatic presence in Iran, and whether or not that might provide a channel to help with evacuations.
Great. We have a number of formal memorandum of understanding with a number of countries. We have one as a whole with the Five Eye partners, US, UK, Australia, and New Zealand. We have one with France. We have one with the European Union, and recently now with Japan. This, in many ways, formalizes existing cooperation between capitals, but also on the ground. But for us, it's also an important tool so that our missions across the region receive a clear political message that they can cooperate. While they would be tempted, sometimes they'll say, well, we'll need to check back with HQ. In this instance, they know there's an MOU, they know there's this agreement to cooperate, to provide mutual assistance, and that gives them license to cooperate. Whether it's things like us notifying the British government when UK nationals come to our attention at a border point, we can rechannel, redirect them to the proper services, whether it's sharing buses and charter flights, whether it's offering logistical assistance, sharing insights as well. That's an important element of what's happening at the border, what's happening on the ground. Our teams have, through these MOUs, that license and clear message to cooperate, and it's a very effective tool.
Thanks. And in terms of presence, I'm assuming that some of those partners probably still do maintain a presence in Iran?
Some of those countries do still have a presence in Iran. It provides us useful ground truth. This said, the ability of those present in Tehran to do anything at this juncture is extremely limited. For their own nationals and for anyone else. And what we're hearing from the Iranians who are able to or have taken the decision and made their way to border is that it's a very difficult decision for them to take. There's a risk to their security for moving to the border. Once they're at the border, they're very happy to be there. We've had one Canadian be greeted by one of our SRDTs. He sat down, an elderly gentleman sat down and started singing "O Canada" when he arrived in Azerbaijan. So those are the types of reactions we get on a daily basis. You hear also some other stories in the media as well. But it's the situation in Iran for now is very difficult, and there's very limited elements that we can do in terms of physically supporting the Canadians other than giving them the information so that they can make an informed choice.
Thank you. I just want to ask a quick follow-up to Senator Wilson's question before we go to Senator Coyle, and that is Italy still our protecting power in Iran in terms of the relationship in a more formal sense?
Yes, Italy remains our protective power. That is a responsibility that Italy has accepted to take on our behalf to represent us with the host government, in this case, in Iran. Obviously, what any protective power, including Italy, can do with the host country at this stage is very limited.
Thank you very much. Senator Coyle to be followed by Senator Harder.
Thank you. And thank you for taking the time at this very, I'm sure it's not easy to have the time to be with us here today. I'm imagining that visit we had to the Emergency Watch and Response Center when we were doing our Foreign Service study, and I can just now imagine it populated in the way that you're describing. I was actually going to ask a very similar question to what my colleague Senator Wilson did, but I have a couple of others. I'm curious about the teams that are rapidly deployed to the region. Did you tell us where they are deployed and how they are actually functioning? Just be curious what they're doing, where they are.
Great, thank you. First and foremost, on being here, it's important for us to be here as well, because you are parliamentarians and it's an opportunity to get our message out. You have constituents who are worried, and then you're able to explain what the Government of Canada is doing. On SRDT deployments abroad, they have a go bag. They're often told as crises develop that they can be asked to leave within 12 or 24 hours. We give them a little heads up. And then they're deployed in a particular function and territory under the authority of the ambassador and working with the rest of the team that's either in country or accredited to that country. We have some in Turkey. They're at a transit point near Van, which is a major gateway from Iran. They're in Azerbaijan, in Astara, at the border again, and in this instance, that post has accepted to represent our other partners. We were talking about the MOU. So our SRDTs there are working on behalf of a coalition of partners to greet the Canadians and other nationals making their way across. We have some in Turkmenistan, in Armenia, as well as in Egypt at Taba and Israel, down in Eilat. They're also in Cairo, in Dubai, in Ramallah, in Beirut, in Amman, and in Riyadh, again, to supplement that existing capacity. And they're usually on 2 or 3 week rotations because they need a break too. And they have a regular day job within the Government of Canada at Global Affairs. So we like to rotate them as the needs evolve, and either supplement or scale down, knowing that we remain responsive and are able to scale up again very rapidly.
What would be a typical shift? How many days?
It's usually 3 weeks.
3 weeks, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Harder to be followed by Senatrice Euance.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, and through you, thank your staff, both here and around the world. I want to follow up on the duty to protect with respect to our staff. Can you update us on where dependents have been evacuated and whether there has been any enhanced protection of our missions abroad? And in that context, I would like you to speak to both Mexico and Cuba as well as the Middle East.
Perfect, thank you. Our duty of care is a key pillar. I said in my opening remarks that the safety of Canadians, but also our personnel, is paramount in everything we do. We have reduced our posture both in terms of non-essential staff, but also in terms of dependents in Tel Aviv, in Beirut, and in Baghdad currently. We have also done the same in Ramallah. That's a temporary arrangement as the situation evolves and we're able to revisit. We have a range of security protocols for those remaining that are now heightened as the situation warrants. It fluctuates on a day-by-day basis, whether it relates to protocol movements, moving in armored vehicles, go, no-go zones within the territory of accreditation. Those are all elements that are taken into consideration as the heads of mission ensure and deliver on that duty of care towards our staff and towards dependents. There are also pre-existing policies before this crisis. For example, in Lebanon, it's an unaccompanied post, so only adult dependent spouses are allowed. So that also gives us a bit more freedom of action and a higher risk tolerance to situations as they evolve. And that's also why sometimes you see in the media a country moving to or adjusting their posture, and then perhaps you get questions as to why isn't Canada doing that? Case in point, Australia at one point adjusted their posture, and we got the question, well, why isn't Canada doing that? Well, we're already in that mode of no accompanying children, and that's the move that one of our partners had been taken. So there is a flux in our approach, and we have a whole security team and mission security team keeping close watch with.
And could you comment on Mexico and Cuba as well?
Yeah. The situation in Mexico, currently, there was a situation 2 weeks ago related to the cartels. We did not have to reduce our mission footprint, though we had clear guidelines to shelter in place as the same information that we shared with Canadians dutifully through our travel advice and our ROCA messaging to the 80,000 Canadians registered on ROCA. On Cuba, we currently maintain our posture there. A number of steps have been taken to ensure the sustainability of our operations given the numerous shortages. We have, for example, solar panels to save on fuel and the use of generators. We've reduced the days that the missions are open as well, in line with the government of Cuba's decisions to also limit the services that it offers and its own operations and its request to ensure that sustainability of operations. So security and sustainability of operations is key to us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sénatrice Youance, maintenant suivi par le sénateur Adler.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. My first question will follow up on some of your answers. For Canadians and permanent residents choosing to remain in the affected zones in the Middle East, what can the government do to ensure their security and maintain consular support? You talked about support from Italy, but there are operational limits because there's no embassy in Iran and there are risks. So what to do with people who decide to remain? Thank you for the question. It is an important one. And in fact, it's put to us every day. Even though we did issue advisories and recommended that Canadians leave the region if they can, many do decide to stay for a variety of reasons. We continue to be there for them, and we continue to offer advice. If they decide to remain, we ask them to make sure that they can shelter in place for extended periods, so to have enough water, generators, fuel, food, medication. As circumstances change, it becomes more difficult for us to provide support, but our commitment to support them as best as we are able remains a place, of course, taking into account the duty of care and our own safety and the circumstances in the theater, whether we ourselves can travel in the country or in the region that is part of an active conflict. Given the current geopolitical situation, can you say that Canada has the capacity to deal with a number of crises simultaneously, including conflicts in Cuba, Mexico, other countries affected by the war in Iran, among others? We do have the capacity. Today we're talking about the Middle East more generally, but it reflects very different circumstances in 15 different countries with about a dozen embassies between them. So I think we're showing that we can manage a number of crises, or certainly one very complex crisis in the Middle East. And we have just come out of the issues in Mexico. Before that, Cuba. In the fall, there was Jamaica. And before that, Iran and Israel again. So I can reassure you that we do have the capacity to respond to a number of crises. As we say, we prepare ourselves for a poly-crisis or a perma-crisis world.
So I have no experience in diplomacy, either professional or amateur, so I want to stipulate. And so here's where my curiosity always goes in times like this. Does the government have some sort of, are the political brakes on when it comes to doing what just regular people think would be wise, preventive medicine? So concretely, when you've got an American and an Israeli leader clearly beating the war drums weeks before the stuff of war hits the fan, is there a political reason why the Canadian government wouldn't tell Canadians abroad, especially in Israel and Iran, that we'd like to do whatever we can to encourage you and even to help you get the H out of town now, before the war begins, or whatever the diplomatic language is. I just wonder if there's a political reason why there can't be some preventive medicine.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. I think as part of our toolbox, one of the main elements, and I was alluding to it earlier, is our travel advice. We have travel advice for 230 destinations, and in the case of Iran, for many years, it's been avoid all travel to Iran. So managing expectations in that sense. You mentioned Israel. Israel and Lebanon and Palestine have been up and down between what we call level 3 and level 4. That is, avoid non-essential travel, or avoid all travel, and it's been varying. And we've been using all the tools we have, including cautions from ministers of foreign affairs over the past crises, to amplify that message to Canadians in terms of avoiding a particular country or heeding our advice.
I appreciate that very much, but once things get hotter, it's just not the norm. I mean, yes, I understand that you've got the advisory because those countries are normally tender, shall we say. But once we have, like I say, specifically the leaders of Israel and the United States, and obviously the leadership in Iran, getting closer and closer to the precipice, I would think, just as a Canadian who has friends in different parts of the world, it wouldn't hurt to strongly encourage those. You mentioned, I'll add Lebanon, because obviously southern Lebanon is a battleground. So I'm just asking: is there no diplomatic way of jacking up the advisory to the point of we're approaching what looks like an emergency? We'd like to help you prepare now.
Thank you for the question, and I would argue that is exactly what we're doing. I was alluding to the travel advice, but on top of that, that messaging to Canadians who are registered in a particular territory. We issued direct and clear messaging on February 20th, more than a week before the hostilities started, again on the 27th, and ever since as well, with very clear messaging. Leave if it is safe to do so, because obviously in some instances it's up to Canadians to make that decision, that determination, but we have been very, very insistent. We also have our social media channels that amplify this, including and I keep referring to our travel advice because it is an important tool, and perhaps the proof of how important it is, 30 million hits a year on travel.gc.ca for advice on the Middle East, but also across the region. More than 500,000 Canadians are registered to our ROCA system across the world and across destinations. So we're always keen to do more, but I feel that we're flooding the airwaves in terms of messages to Canadians, and that has been consistent for the past months.
Just a couple of seconds, if I can. Is that the standard with our allies as well? Do they all generally comport this way?
All our allies have similar travel advice, travel alerts. They'll come up in the media and even in Canada sometimes. And we are, as we develop this advice, we also develop it in concert with our partners who have either particular presence in a country, particular insights into a country or a situation, and we're usually quite aligned because of that cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're coming to the end of round one, and that's usually when I ask a question. So here it comes. This is not the first crisis we've had in terms of evacuating Canadians, and I look over at my colleague Senator Harder. He and I were quite involved 20 years ago in the evacuation of some 15,000 Canadians from Lebanon. And at that time, we did not have an operations center the way you have now. That was one of the lessons that we took out of it, that we needed one. But there was also some confusion because in the past, if you wished to have consular assistance or repatriation, you had to fill out an undertaking to repay form. And because the demand was so great at that time, the Harper government was also new, and we had to do some unusual things like charter boats out of northern Cyprus. It was decided it was just too complicated. We would waive that requirement. So I note that in the public messaging, certainly by Minister Anand and others, there's always been reference to evacuation on a cost recovery basis. And I'm wondering whether you could tell us just how does that cost recovery basis work if you're dealing with buses and charter flights and the like.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Chair. Our first line of response is to work with the commercial airlines. So for Canadians to either get the information or for us to reserve seats for Canadians for them to make their arrangements and pay the airlines for the commercial service they're receiving. That's the ideal situation, not only from a taxpayer's perspective, but also from a flyer perspective. These airlines have onward connections. Charters are a bit trickier, but when we do have to put them on, we go out to air carriers, to the private sector, and ask for proposals and submissions. And then in that case, we organize a flight. In the case of the flight from Doha, the UAE, to Istanbul, the single charter that we put on in this instance, we established what was the cost of a flight from on Expedia that in normal circumstances, and that's what we decided to charge Canadians. You were referring to an undertaking to repay UTR. We have since evolved and are now using an online platform whereby a client who says, yes, I would like to be on that charter, when we share information with that client, we send them an email with a direct link so that they can make the payment for that charter flight at that commercial equivalent cost. So it's great for the client. It's much more efficient. We were alluding to working smarter and using technology. That's certainly part of it. And the recovery rate is great with that system. And if the client is not in a position to pay, they can also forward that email to their family back in Canada so that the payment gets made. So that's an important part of cost recovery, and that's how we've been doing it for past crises since Haiti, in fact.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad there's been that positive evolution. We could have used that 20 years ago. We'll go to round two. Senator Busson to be followed by Senator Ravalia. Senator Busson.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it begs the question from your question, what if nobody has any relatives in Canada with a Visa card? How do they get turned down on the flights?
Ultimately, nobody gets turned down from our services. We do have that ultimately an undertaking to repay where that is signed off by the client, and we do the recovery later.
That's reassuring. If I might, I did have another question prepared, if I could. I was really interested in how you were talking about the SRDT, the Standing Rapid Deployment Team, and how it was utilized. And in my mind, I envision a very dangerous environment where these folks operate. And offer to meet and escort or help people evacuate in very difficult situations. I don't imagine that these folks are just picked willy-nilly from the offices in different consulates, et cetera. Could you tell me a little bit about how they're selected and how they are trained to deal with some of these situations? My mind goes back to my own life. I used to do that kind of work in a very small way, and it's very dangerous. So I'm just wondering what you could offer in reassurance that these folks are well-trained.
Perfect. Before turning it to my colleague Yannick, who oversees those deployments and that rapid deployment team, I'd also add that for Canadians in distress abroad who don't have the financial means, we also issue loans. In addition to whatever charter flights or that needs to be repaid, so we do offer that support. In terms of the SRDTs, they're highly trained. Many of them have operated abroad in a range of countries. They have skill sets. They go through training with us, including training in a hostile environment. And I'll let my colleague complement. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Indeed, our SRDT members, they're diplomats, right? They're not special forces, so we're not deploying into very dangerous situation, but there are risks where we operate, of course. We do select people who have experience being posted abroad, having worked on various crises. We send them to the hostile environment training course. We give them specific training and sessions with experienced SRDT members. They're also working within the framework of the embassies where they're being deployed. So they have security teams that provide them with some advice and some guidance. And ultimately, we're not, for instance, sending SRDTs inside Iran because it's too dangerous. They are along the countries bordering with Iran, for example. Sometimes if we organize transportation, such as a bus, and we want to have our personnel there, if the security situation is not good enough, we will have to cancel the transportation because it's dangerous for our personnel as well as for our clients. It's often better to remain inside than being on the road. But so we do take precaution for them to be well prepared. We have in-person trainings where we do with actors, and we try to test their abilities to work under stress and to see how they respond. And some people have not been deployed because they were not the best fit to work in a stressful, difficult environment, and they can help us at headquarters instead of being in the field.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. If I could just ask a quick follow-on, can you deploy people who also have linguistic ability? I'm thinking particularly of Arabic and Farsi in this instance.
We will do that, of course, when we have those needs abroad. We have, of course, staff in our embassies that are pre-trained and have language skills, but we do have Arabic and Farsi speakers right now that are being deployed or that are working at the emergency contact center to respond to people who have inquiries from the region.
Thank you. Senator Robalia, followed by Senator Jarba.
Thank you, Chair. Given the dramatic acceleration of the crisis in southern Lebanon with expedited relocation, are you able to update us on the number of Canadians who may have been impacted by this surge in people moving, and any emergency plans that may be in place to assist them?
We're not aware of, we haven't received specific requests for assistance from that situation in terms of injuries. But obviously, if you look at the numbers, it's 800,000 that's being reported today. There are inevitably some impacted Canadians, and indeed in Lebanon, whether you're displaced or not, it is a very difficult time to be in Beirut or elsewhere across the country. So yes, they are impacted, but there are no major consular individual cases per se of injuries or people in dire distress.
Thank you.
Senator Jarba, to be followed by
Merci,
Senator
Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to go to Senator Harder's question regarding duty of care. In the current circumstances, how can your department ensure that the Government of Canada's duty of care to its employees, and that includes employees hired locally, who account for a significant percentage of foreign mission staff, how can you ensure that the duty of care is complied with, particularly as regards evacuation protocols, risk management, and family protection?
Cette question-là est au cœur de nos opérations.
That question is really at the core of our operations and our day-to-day decisions. The duty of care is to employees, to their families, and to local employees. To give you an example of how important we consider duty of care, a number of missions in recent weeks have been operating remotely. That is, we were there for Canadians, but there were no in-person services open to the public in the embassies because we wanted people to be able to work from home and not to have to travel to the office every day because it wasn't safe enough for them to do so. So we have measures of that kind. And we adjust what we do, sometimes day to day, sometimes in the course of a single day. We might decide to close midday because we believe things might get worse, or because there could be demonstrations and we want to ensure that staff, and that includes local staff, are safe. Quite often local staff have much further to travel to the suburbs, and we want everyone to be protected and not put at risk as they provide service to Canadians. There are many protocols, and travel and movement protocols are applied to local employees as they are to Canadian employees. We have armoured cars for significant travel, and those rules are the same for Canadian employees and local employees as they perform their official duties. So we do have an entire range of measures that we take every day. They might be managed from here in Canada or locally. They are the responsibility of the head of the embassy or consulate. And duty of care really is, I should say, at the core of what we do. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have two questions. I'm going to put them both out there. They're quite different. The first one is our relationships with our Five Eyes partners in particular. In this case, which may not have ever happened before, I'm not sure, one of our Five Eyes partners is a belligerent in the conflict. Does that have any impact on how we work together in this particular situation? And my second question is, we have a map showing us the Canadian missions in the region. If we were ever to need military support, what's the mapping of those locations look like at this point?
Great. I'll start with the first question on cooperation with Five Eyes. Again, the US, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. We have a coordination call every day on the situation where people from my team speak to their counterparts in those four other governments, where we exchange information not only on what is happening and the evolution of the conflict, but also in terms of the pressures on the ground and what each of us are doing. And that's one of the important fora where we're able to share information on. We are putting, for example, we are organizing a bus transfer tomorrow from country X to Y. If you have any pressures, let us know, and we'll include your nationals in our efforts. So that's the type of coordination that's happened. It continues to happen throughout this conflict, as it does and as it has over past crises, and we're very pleased that cooperation continues across the Five Eyes.
So business as usual.
Cooperation is great, yes.
Okay. And then military.
Yes. In terms of a military response or our footprint, that's outside my remit today in front of this in this committee. But you are aware that Canada has missions across the regions and troops around the world, and CAF does the planning they do and the deployments and managing the resources they have. We, as always, and it's not particular to this situation, it's the same across the board. As soon as a situation emerges anywhere in the world, we're in close contact with the Canadian Armed Forces, Strategic Joint Staff, and make sure that we're on the same page and that we're connected in terms of our own planning for an immediate response and our own planning for an outward response to a range of scenarios that remain hypothetical. Thank you.
Yes.
So what you're saying then is that you have a number of contingency plans depending on the situation, and if I can discern, there is a task force that would also include representatives from the Canadian Armed Forces and D&D, in addition to the Canadian Forces attachés that we might have in missions abroad. Is that reasonable?
That's correct. Plans and tools from A to Z, with D&D and the CAF on our regular daily coordination call that Yannick chairs every morning with a range of federal partners, including D&D and the CAF, so that all are watching and seeing the same information from the ground, the same development, and the same trajectory, while making prudent planning for other trajectories as well. Thank you.
You're always dealing in hypotheticals.
And very real situations as well, and that's the challenge.
Yeah. Ones that
There's
become
immediate
real.
planning and there's outward planning.
So in the Senator's trajectory, we have next Senator Zerba, to be followed by Senator Buston. Senator Zerba.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. A few moments ago, you said you had a team of officers that are outside Iran's borders or at the borders, and I imagine that's the rapid deployment team. How long do you plan to keep that team in the region? Our teams will remain as long as necessary, so that they can be ready for anything. Imagine that in Iran there might be something that occurs leading to a larger number of people wishing to leave or more people fleeing Iran. Our staff will remain in Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Turkmenistan at or near the border, near transit points. To leave Iran, Canadians contact us. We try to help them get to the border so that they can enter a neighboring country with the help of our local partners. And after that, we can help them reach other modes of transportation to help them reach Canada. Our budget's for these efforts unlimited. We do what we need to do. Thank you.
And just very quickly, you were doing a very good job of explaining how the international community works together and the MOUs that take place, et cetera. I'm wondering, domestically, are there other departments other than the Department of National Defense and your department that are involved in these, not just the quick response teams, but generally the atmosphere and the environment of crisis in these situations?
Yes, I'd perhaps we have a wide-ranging list of partners, but in addition to D&D and the CAF, I would clearly also mention, first and foremost, the Privy Council Office that supports the Prime Minister, who is kept apprised of our operations and what's happening on the ground. IRCC for the issuance of travel documents, of visas in the case of non-Canadian family members, and the issuance of permanent resident cards and management of that. CBSA also for the vetting of passengers coming to Canada, and keeping track of numbers. And I was alluding to 8,000 having made their way from the Middle East in the past 2 weeks. Those are key partners for us in our response. But again, that list is much broader as well. And we have all those partners lined up daily, every morning, 7 days a week, not just 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, in close cooperation with them. As the situation evolves, we were alluding to our Emergency Watch and Response Center. Those partners become co-located with us to ensure a more efficient flow of information, atmospherics, and quick decision-making, again, to bolster our response and ensure that we have all the tools we need.
The fact that you have had no Canadian casualties today certainly is evidence of the effectiveness and the nimbleness of how you respond. So I want to congratulate and make note and recognize that on our part, or on my part, certainly. Thank you.
I won't take credit for that, but I will be grateful that we have no Canadians injured or casualties.
Thank you. Senator Harder.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a bit of a follow-up. The diaspora community in Canada can be a partner, but it can also seek unrealistic expectations. Are you engaging with the diaspora community from the affected communities, countries that we're talking about? And if so, what's the state of that relationship?
We don't have a formal mechanism whereby we engage the communities, but through our public communications, through the communications from our missions that are also tracked or followed from Canada. Those are important channels to get our message out, to manage expectations. But perhaps the most important element is all the people. I was alluding to over 10,000 calls into the 24/7 EWRC. It's not all Canadians in the region asking for information or, in some instances, assistance. In many cases, it's worried families in Canada asking about, are there flights? Will there be charters? How do I get a passport renewal for my son or my nephew or friend who's in the region? In some cases, we also have inquiries about whereabouts. I haven't heard from my traveling son for the past 2 days, 3 days, 1 week. Can you help me locate them? So that's the type of question and engagement we have from within Canada, and that's part of our consular service.
Great, thank you.
Senators, are there any other questions? Sénatrice Jouance.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. C'est une question.
Thank you, Chair. It's a question that could be a bit sensitive in the sense that the meetings we've had with immigration officials on the register Well, Canadians move, they travel around. How do you use a register abroad to reach people who might be in the country? What's your obligation? In asking people to register with consular services in case they would need to evacuate? Thank you for the question. We have a service, we provide a service. We ask and encourage Canadians to register because it is in their best interest. That's what we try to communicate as a message. But we've never gone so far as to obliging them to register. I don't think we'd have the means or the willingness to force anybody to say they're traveling to one country or another during their personal travel. But once they arrive in the country, I'm thinking about when they are in the country. When they register, when abroad, we encourage Canadians to register. Embassy communications do the same. Through social media, through their platform, through attention within the Canadian community in whichever country is in question. But registration is voluntary and remains so.
I'd like to thank Sébastien Beaulieu, Yannick Lamonde for joining us today. I have told anyone who has asked, and it's been the media, that we have a world-class consular and emergency service in our country. For that, I think all Canadians can be grateful. We are grateful to you for your service, and please take, as Senator Harder said earlier, take that message back to your teams as well, because we know how hard you work on behalf of Canadians. So with that, thank you very much, and we are adjourned.